Hello, everyone. This is Bob Davies with our seventh follow-up program, 7 of 7. And I'm only going to do two things on this program, two concepts, and they're both very, very powerful. So let's begin. We're talking about excellence. So this has been a series reinforcing what I did in your keynote about business and performance and personal excellence. And as I've emphasized this entire follow-up series, it's all about how our brain operates, the neurochemicals that are occurring on a moment-by-moment basis within this 100 billion neuron assembly that we have in our brain, and how we can influence this through our thoughts, through our actions. And so I wasn't going to talk about this, but I came across this today, and I said, I would be remiss if I didn't at least give you a cursory look at health. And I saw this in today's newspaper memoir of growing up obese strikes raw nerve in France. And it was talking about to be fat in France is to be a loser. Gabrielle, I guess it would be Dadier, wrote a book that has really become a media sensation. She is obese, 330 pounds, and she was writing about the prejudice that occurs, the discrimination that occurs. And in France, it's currently at 16% of the adult population obese, which is up from about 12% just 8 years ago. Compare that to the United States, and more than a third of the population, of the adult population, is considered to be obese. And it is just rising and rising. So I thought that I would talk to you about a solution that occurs, that I have, for an industry that does not have a solution. 99.9% of what is being provided fails. It's a dismal, dismal rate. And it's got to be part of our foundation is how you nourish yourself, how you take in nutrients. And I saw this. I wasn't quite sure how many people a year die from obesity-related disease, cardiovascular disease, and this is preventable. And I thought it was 400,000 a year die in the United States, but I was wrong. About 610,000 people die of heart disease in the United States every year. That's 1 in every 4 deaths. And it's the leading cause of death for both men and women, with more than half of the deaths due to heart disease in 2009 from men. And the thing about this is that it is preventable, but you don't hear this. This isn't, can you imagine any other industry, any other type of an environment where there was a 99.9% failure? You don't think that would make the news? Why isn't this making the news, leading the news every single day? Instead, you know what the news reporters say, if it bleeds, it leads. Instead, we live in a negative, pathetic environment of negative news, just everything from politics to world events. The focus is on the negative. It's just horrendous. And all the meantime, we allow over 600,000 people to die every year from a preventable disease. So let me give you the short version. See, part of the issue here is that you didn't ask for this. It's not a part of my follow-up series, but I'm going to give you a very short version of this. And what I'm about to do in this webinar can be life-changing for you. Love to come back and give you the full version and give you more details, but let's just start with this. So here's what the issue is. First 5 feet of height. Everybody give yourself 100 pounds. Women, each inch taller, give yourself 5 pounds per inch. So if you are 5'6", you should be weighing around 130 plus or minus 5 pounds. Men, first 5 feet, 100 pounds. Each inch taller, add 7 pounds per inch. I'm 5'11". I should be right around 177 plus or minus 5 pounds, so about 182 would be my normal range. When I first heard this, the heaviest I ever was 240, and I've been in this range 177 to 182, 183. I've been in that range. I'm going on for a full 6 years. I'm in my 7th year of being in that range. Really amazing with one simple solution I'm going to give you. So, have you heard of TOFI? T-O-F-I. Thin on the outside, fat on the inside. I've heard this called skinny fats. You can't tell about the health of an individual by how they look on the outside. It's obvious when somebody is very obese, and you can see that they're very heavy. But it's not just reserved. The health issues are not just reserved for the outward appearance, because skinny fats, thin on the outside, fat on the inside, looks like this. This is a full body functional MRI. So let's take a closer look. What you're seeing, this is the outside layer of fat. This is a very thin person. Not much of an outside layer of fat. This is the inside, what's called visceral fat. This person's kidneys are floating in 4 to 5 liters of visceral fat. This is just outrageous. This person is in, if they're not pre-diabetic, they're going to be diabetic. This person is in great risk, not from outside appearances, but from visceral internal fat. And so this conversation is for everyone. Now, I was influenced by several people in terms of learning this, what I'm going to share with you. Probably the biggest influencer was Nora Volkow. She's known for her brain research, and particularly research on dopamine and dopamine receptor sites. And it's really very interesting to study her information, because what she says is that this obesity epidemic that we are all facing, we're facing this worldwide, this has nothing to do with morality. It has nothing to do with a person's desire or their personality characteristics. It's from the inside out. It's biochemical. And dopamine is this big chemistry. It's this big neurotransmitter that is the issue. And human nature is very, very clever. Human nature has made anything that we need to do for survival, to ensure our survival, human nature has made it pleasurable. And what that means is that there's a reward circuitry in the brain. And it's called the VTA, which I'll keep it simplified for us here. But the VTA stands for this. There's an area called the nucleus accumbens. There's an area called the VTA, ventral, I don't even know what it's called. I have to look it up, something area. And then the frontal cortex. Basically, this is very heavily influenced by dopamine. Dopamine is this pleasurable drug, that neurotransmitter is a drug, it's a chemical that stimulates us to be active. It motivates us. We feel good. We want to do more of the activities that create a release of dopamine. And this is showing how amphetamine increases the release of dopamine, as well as food follows the same trajectory. We get amphetamine addiction, we get food addiction. So there are two issues with healthy weight management. And it's not about being on a diet. You don't go on a diet and you don't exercise. The two issues have to do with cravings and hunger. So let's first look at cravings. You know what I'm talking about with cravings? Where you just can't stop yourself. I can remember I would buy a box of Klondike ice cream bars, a cookie wafer on the outside, a beautiful vanilla ice cream on the inside. I'd buy a box of 8, and I would intend maybe to eat 2. And I'd put the rest in the freezer. And before you know it, any box became an empty box. I would eat all of them. It just seemed that I just couldn't stop myself. Have you ever had that? Have you ever had out of control eating? And I would buy these 100 calories when I thought you count calories, 100 calories meal replacement bars. I'd buy a box of them and I would eat every single one in the box. Cravings, insatiable cravings. Well, my stance here, which is supported by science, is that any feeling that we have is an internal chemistry. Every thought that we have is internal chemistry. Well, what is the internal chemistry of cravings? Let's dissect it. So how the brain communicates. What we have is we have a neuron. Let me show you a different diagram here. This is what the brain cell, and we have 100 billion of these. This is what it looks like. You have a cell body. You have dendrites. These dendrites are the receptor sites that receive incoming signals, which are chemicals. And they are passed down an axon fast. This is myelinated. It's fast. And then it gets turned into chemistry. So it goes from a chemical to an electrical signal to another chemical. And right here, this is what you're looking at right up top here. This is the synapse, which is a very small subatomic space between neurons. This is how our neurons communicate. And the offending neuron, the neuron that we seek, is the neurotransmitter dopamine. We seek dopamine to the exclusion of everything else. Everything else. And you give a rat an opportunity to press a lever and get dopamine hits, and it will not eat, it will not choose anything, it will just keep pressing that lever for dopamine. We, by nature, we seek dopamine. But what happens is this. Here's what's called the reward circuitry of the human brain. Here's the phrase I was stuck on before, the ventral tegmental area. Key source of dopamine. So it's really three areas in this reward circuitry. Then you have the nucleus accumbens right in here. Dopamine released here has a role in addiction and craving. So you have electroactivities in these two areas of the brain, and then a signal is sent to the prefrontal cortex. So now it's like the rudder of a boat. The reward circuitry is the motor. It's driving dopamine. It's driving this boat. And now the cortex is steering you and seeking and making decisions and creating actions towards the finding of whatever the substance is or whatever the activity is that is releasing dopamine. And this is how our reward circuitry drives behavior. You're not on purpose here. You're being instinctively driven. And you're not making decisions with your prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex is being driven, compelled, obsessed by this flood of dopamine. So here's the problem, though. The problem is that the human brain adapts. Here's a healthy brain. Healthy brain, you eat some food and you get a release of dopamine, and the dopamine finds its receptor sites. You feel good, you become satisfied, and you stop eating. This is a healthy brain. But when this is offended, and it's offended by drugs, by cocaine, by amphetamine. It's offended by something I'm going to talk about in just a bit, the way that we eat with the standard American diet. When you get a flood, our brain is not designed to handle an abundance of dopamine. So what happens as an adaptation is the receptor sites thin out. The receptor sites actually get depleted. Now the dopamine can't hit these sites. You can't feel good. So what do we do when we can't feel good? We need more of whatever the activity is or the substance that's producing the dopamine. And so we have to have more and more and more. And this is a definition, a description of cravings. When you crave something, it's because your brain is injured. You have a depletion of the dopamine receptor sites. And here's a magnetic image of this. Normal, the red is activity in the receptor site. So the top left is what you're seeing here. With constant bombardment of too much dopamine, you get a depletion of the receptor site. So somebody who's addicted to cocaine, they have to have more and more and more cocaine, not to get high, but to feel normal, to get back to baseline. And you can see the same thing happens. There is very little activity in the receptor sites in this BTA reward circuitry because of the depletion of the dopamine receptor sites. This is cravings. This is what cravings is. Okay, so you see that cravings is not mindset. Cravings is not weak morale. Cravings is biochemistry, depletion of dopamine receptor sites. Let's talk about hunger. What is hunger? Well, hunger has to do with a hormone called leptin. And I mentioned this briefly in your general session keynote that there's an area of the brain called the apostat that stimulates the fat cells to release a hormone called leptin. When leptin is in your bloodstream, you feel satisfied, you get moving, and you stop eating. Well, since the fat cells release leptin, you might think, well, if somebody is very heavy, they would have more fat cells. When they release more leptin? Yes, they would. But the problem is leptin doesn't work as it is intended to work when you have high levels of glucose in your blood for a sustained period of time. You get what's called insulin insensitivity, leptin insensitivity. The brain can't see leptin. So here's how it's supposed to work. How it's supposed to work is simply this. When it's not working, this is what you get. Not good or bad, but this is the body's inflammatory response to depleted dopamine receptor sites and insulin and leptin insensitivity. This is what you get. So when you have a knockout gene, it's called leptin knockout gene. When you stop the production of leptin, knock out the gene, the mice don't stop eating. They can't respond to any signals. They just sit at the food trough and just eat and eat and eat and eat. That's all they'll do. So let's look at what is supposed to happen. We eat, food gets stored, fat cells secrete leptin, the brain sees the leptin, and we stop eating. But this gets blocked. This gets blocked by a constant chronic high level of blood sugar. And so this is what hunger is. Now, there is a solution. And the solution, that is not, you're not being told. I have a very precise solution, but I'm going to give you the short version. The solution is this: eliminate sugar, eliminate flour. If you eliminate flour and sugar, you will not be able to maintain the inflammatory state. Your receptor sites will replenish themselves. Your brain will heal. You'll get the normal sensations and feelings from a normal amount of food. Your cravings will stop. You'll improve on your brain being able to interact with leptin. Your cravings will stop. Your hunger will stop. And you will have this aced for the rest of your life. Go back to the beginning of this webinar and see what that maintenance weight is. And you will be there for the rest of your life. And one thing that you can do in this brief explanation of this is avoid the drug of flour and sugar. And it's a drug. It's a drug just like cocaine. It's a refined drug just like heroin. And I'd be happy even if you just cut back on flour and sugar, you will see immediate results. So that's the short version. Love to come back and give you a more detailed version because it is life-changing. Let me know. Be happy to do that. I've mentioned on some of the, well, here's my program. And by the way, if I can do this, you can do it. My heaviest was 240. My lightest was 175, a little bit too light. I've been at this range for over 6 years. Somebody once said, I guess they paid me a compliment. They said, looks like Photoshop is a great thing. I wouldn't even know how to Photoshop this. But you can see somebody did Photoshop. And what somebody did, I don't even know who did this, they took out the background. And there's what the background should look like. But anyway, they took it out. So this is real. And you get fake testimonials. I mean, you get all kinds of scams out there. I am telling you, anything that comes at you and says you got to eat this specialized food that you got to buy from me, or you got to exercise, or you got to count calories, or you got to stay away from fat, just run away. Cut back on flour and sugar. That's it. If you can eliminate it, you're better off. All right. Here's the program that I teach. Now, this is not the specifics of the weight management, but read 1 page a day from the daybook. Now, you're getting the daily videos. So keep participating with that. They're short. Meditate 5 to 10 minutes every day. That also helps with the replenishing of the receptor sites. Abstain from flour and sugar. Cut back, cut back, cut back, eliminate. Easy to do. If flour and sugar is in the first 5 ingredients of the label of the food, don't eat it. And then exercise. You don't exercise for weight management. You exercise for fitness. And then precise weekly preparation And also, I took out of there, but I would say hire a coach, have a coach, have somebody that holds you accountable, have somebody that you talk with a couple times a month, where you are looking at what your goals are, looking at your progress, looking at challenges, what's working, what's not working. Very powerful process. All right, I mentioned many times that I would talk about quantum theory. And this is the ending webinar. And so here we go with a brief, simplified quantum conversation. What is quantum? There are two laws of physics. There's the law of the large, classical physics. Action, reaction. You have to make a certain amount of calls. We talked about this last time. You have to make a certain amount of calls to get a certain amount of appointments, to get a certain amount of sales. And action, reaction, cause and effect. This is how you send a rocket ship up to the moon. You put something in orbit around the Earth. Laws, classical physics, laws of the large. However, what we have done is we've kept looking smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Reductionism. We keep looking from the large to we want to know the elements. We want to know the building blocks. We want to know on a smaller and smaller and smaller level. And when you do that, what you find out is that the space between neurons is subatomic. That's quantum. Quantum physics has different laws than classical physics. This is the quest for the theory of everything, one unifying principle of the universe. And what we find is that it has to do, everything has to do with energy. Now, I'm studying this right now. This is the leading research about the energy in a photon of an atom has quantum fluctuations, just like the energy of a black hole of a galaxy. And within those quantum fluctuations, mankind's ability to understand that then gives us the ability to control it, and that gives us the ability to influence the one thing that represents, which is gravity. And when mankind can control gravity, then you're going to find that we can go from Los Angeles to Newark in 6 minutes, because the issue of propulsion is not going to be an issue anymore. When we can manipulate gravity and we can move a spaceship into orbit, position it over Newark, and then descend, 3 minutes to get up, maybe 1 minute to position, and 3 minutes to get back. I lied. 7-minute trip from coast to coast. This, when we understand quantum fluctuations of gravity, we will have space stations that people can colonize. We will no longer be bound to the Earth. We will have unlimited supply of resources. I mean, this is very, very interesting, because the scientific knowledge is doubling. Last I heard was every 18 months, and I think it's even back. I think it's down to doubling. Scientific knowledge is doubling now every 12 months, every year. But anyway, let's talk about quantum, because I mentioned something that is very important. Everything is energy. In the last webinar, I talked about Einstein's E equals mc squared, where he said that energy and mass are the same thing. Well, Einstein says this: everything is energy. And that's all there is. That's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy. This is physics. Think about this. Do you realize how big this is? Everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy. This is physics. Now, I've given you some specific skills to do this, such as the 3 circles. Something happens. I give it meaning. I live my life as if that meaning is true. The grateful flow, where gratitude, love, positive thinking, based on science. Tesla, Nikola Tesla. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Well, this is like the universal law of gravity. It doesn't call on you to understand it. Gravity affects you whether you believe it or not, whether you understand it or not, whether you want to participate or not. Gravity affects you. Same thing here. You can choose to participate, that everything is energy, and you can tune into the vibration of what you want with the right kind of thinking. You can tune into this vibration with your meditation, that you can tune in this by focus and action, and you can have a goal, and you can decide what activities you need to do to reach that goal, and you can decide what are those activities you need to do today to reach those goals, and you can have someone hold you accountable so that you would do those activities and tap into being the source of what you experience. Or you can say, I'm not going to participate with this, which is not an option. All it means is there is no not participating with this. You're either directing it positively or you're directing it negatively. If you default and you don't pay attention to this, then you direct it negatively because that's the default. To understand this, to be exposed to this, and not to participate on purpose is being negligent. Now, more recently, Nassim Haramein. Nassim Haramein is today's Albert Einstein. Now, he hasn't won a Nobel Prize. He's got a video on YouTube. I recommend. It's called The Connected Universe. I recommend that you check this out. It not only is it absolutely beautifully done, but it is just one of the most powerful documentaries I've ever seen about how everything is connected. And again, he's saying things that have been said thousands of years ago. Energy. It's all energy. That the cosmos, the planets, the galaxies that we see are energy. That it is 99.999% of space is empty energy. It's not empty, it's not matter, it's energy. So empty equals energy. And it is the space that generates the illusion of matter. And everything, think about this, our blood has iron. Where did iron come from? Iron came from galaxies that collide and produce the compound iron. Our blood wouldn't be able to carry oxygen without iron. We are stardust. We are of the source. It's like go to the ocean and take a spoonful of water out of the ocean. That's from the source. That spoonful has all of the properties of the entire ocean. Remember, I made this statement that you have far more capacity to create the circumstances and events in your life than you are aware of. It's all a matter of tapping in. Tap in. My PowerPoint, if you're wondering what all this noise is, tap in to the energy. Everything is energy. We are a part of this bigger source. And I've heard it said that we just don't have the intellectual capacity to understand this, but that everything is interrelated, everything is interconnected, all the way down from the way that planets move around the nucleus of the sun to the protons, neutrons, electrons in constant circular motion around the nucleus. And everything is energy. So I think that let's make this practical. And before we get real practical, I want to give you the real paradox that still stumps scientists today. What this is saying is that we are a part of something bigger than ourselves. We are a part of it. We are a part of infinite possibilities, infinite potentials. Now here's what's called the Young's double slit paradox or problem. Here's the prevailing problem. Prevailing problem is this. It has to do with energy. So here's the famous experiment. You have two slits and you shine energy, you shine a light at these two slits. What happens is the particles go through both slits. They go through one slit. They seem to split and go through the other slit. They go through both at the same time. They interact with each other and they give you a waveform band behind a photographic plate that captures all this. So shine light, even if you shine one particle at a time, it will be superimposed in all positions, going through, interfering with itself, and produce a wave pattern on a photo plate behind. Until you observe. Once you observe, it changes how it interacts. Now you shine that light and it goes through one slot or the other, but not both. And you get two bands on the back photographic plate. I have to say, this is the simplest I've ever explained this. Maybe I'm starting to get it. Probably not. Again, we don't have the intellectual capability of understanding this really. So all we can do is have faith that this is operating, and it will operate in our benefit if we direct it that way. Rudder of a boat, right? So it's the act of observation that changes what's being observed. Measurement. Every time I go to a company, I always ask, what are your goals? What are your metrics? What do you measure? What are your systems? What are your metrics? What are your key performance indicators? What are your key daily activities? And then fifth is, what are your obstacles? I want to look at goals. I want to look at metrics. I want to look at activities and obstacles. And so the measurement, what do you measure? The active measurement changes what's being observed. Science says, I've given you an example in previous webinars, that if you want to locate the location, if you want to see the location of something, you can't also measure its speed, because once you locate something, it changes. And billiard balls on a table, once you locate one, the active observation changes what's being observed. It ricochets off. So it's just the quantum paradox here. But anyway, what is it about measurement that changes what's being measured, that alters what's being measured? Well, what's being observed, consciousness. It is consciousness that changes what's being observed. And there's been a lot of studies with robots observing and computers observing. This can even happen over the internet. It has to do with consciousness. And lots of studies about worldwide consciousness with 9/11, how it dipped with events that affect worldwide consciousness. But anyway, let's make this practical. What the researchers are saying is this: a wave function superimposes multiple coexisting states that have different probabilities. Observation causes the collapse of the wave function to a specific state. Observation is what you pay attention to. And so one of my coaching commandments is the universe always says yes. And whether you're thinking that life is good, universe says yes. Or if you're thinking life is bad, I've got a lot of problems, the universe says yes. You are the source of all that you experience. Let me give you a practical application of this. I'm sitting on a Delta flight, and I just happened to notice, geez, everybody's walking in, they're in a good mood, everybody's smiling, everybody's cooperative, everybody's helping each other with the luggage, everybody's happy. And then I notice I'm in a good mood. I'm cooperative. I'm smiling. I'm happy. Let's put this into quantum language. All of these different possibilities are superimposed, just like the light that's shown is superimposed and go in any slit at one time, both slits at the same, it's all superimposed. So if you look at this, everything exists in realms of potentials and possibilities. There's a possibility, there's another possibility of a reality. I have all these possibilities. So everybody could be angry. That is a possible reality. Everybody could be rude. Another superimposed possible reality. Everybody could be mean. Everybody could be impatient. I chose E. I chose this, that everybody was nice. Once I chose that reality, quantum physics set in. The observation changed what I was observing, collapsed all other waveforms. The only thing that existed was what I chose, and that was that everybody was nice, everybody was in a good mood. I chose that. I made that happen. And I look at this and I look at what am I choosing? What am I making happen? What am I making happen? Am I making myself angry? Am I making myself miserable? Am I choosing opportunity? Am I choosing obstacles? What about you? What are you choosing in your life? What are you committed to? If you want to know what you're committed to, look at what you have. That's what you're committed to. Now, you might say, well, that can't be. That can't be. I have these money problems. I have these relationship problems. You don't understand my personal circumstance. There are things that are just not understandable, but you bring it all on yourself. If you want a different reality, you need to think differently. You need to approach things differently. You need to stop blaming other people and take full responsibility for the reality that you create. Science says it. Study these webinars. Be a student. Study the day books, videos. Communicate with me. I'm happy to be a mentor for you, to be a coach, to be of assistance to you for a lifetime. Reality is in the mind of the observer. Let me say it again with real emphasis. Reality is in the mind of the observer. You create your reality. Nothing else exists. Read the statements from the scientists based on laws of science. And this is really interesting, is that we still don't know 1,000 of 1% of what nature has revealed to us. Think about this. The venom from a snake can cure a particular disease, or the saliva from a leech can save a limb, the larva from a fly. This is in nature. Chlorophyll, how plants can create oxygen in this interrelated dance. And this has always existed in nature. And then go back to our research and understanding the energy in a photon. And the next big frontier is understanding the quantum fluctuations. And when we do that, we can control gravity. And who knows? One of my other coaching commandments is either growing or decaying. There is no middle ground. And so this is about just being in love with life. It's about passion. It's about having a goal. It's about being of service, having fun, using yourself, giving of yourself until you die. Then you put on your tombstone, see, I told you I was sick. Anyway, I'll end with this, as I always do. You are the sum of the choices you make and the meaning you give to events. Science says take control of this. Problems are to the mind what exercise is to the muscles. They toughen and make strong. Vision is having an acute sense of the possible. It is seeing what others don't see. And when those with similar vision are drawn together, something extraordinary occurs. I'm here for you. Have a great week. Thank you so much for participating in this follow-up series.